and my phone has just gone off, which means that I need to shut up and and hand over to Kiran, who will talk about the next bit. The next bit is okay. So we've talked about objectives and prioritization, but is there a broader structural challenge that we need to think about? And the conversation I had with Kiran t tells me that he's definitely got a view on this. So
Uh, uh,
Kiran, the floor is yours.
Thanks a
Dive
lot.
in.
Thanks, Ted. That's an excellent intro, and Gregor. Half of the stuff I would like to say, you actually covered it. That is the challenge, and we all agree on these things, and we face it on our daily basis in our everyday work. Thanks again, David, for this opportunity. We all agree, and of course, I do agree with the core premise of this session. Organizations do struggle to connect purpose, strategy, and delivery. Prioritization is often chaotic. Sometimes it feels political. We feel like we don't even know our priorities sometimes, and we have so many priorities, and nothing looks like a priority at all. The real issue, in my opinion, is not prioritization itself, but how strategy is translated into something that we can make decisions against. We can go a bit further on this. Probably going back on my own statement, prioritization is one of the few places where strategy, capacity, money, race, or politics all meet in one room. And the underlying mess is visible to everyone. And we see that quite often in many organizations. Where I slightly diverge from this one is that prioritization or OKR framework, they themselves are not the real challenges. They are underlying systemic challenges that is actually conspiring against us, as you say, David, on this. Just going back, the reason why I said that is that in the past 100 to 200 years or so, operations research has given us plenty of tools to prioritize. The scoring mechanisms are not new. They are there for more than 200 years. The P3M folks have given us, portfolio models, other scoring types, and many things are there. The agile and product thinking has given us weighted jobs or backlog prioritizations, and many other tools and techniques were given to us. With 2 centuries of experience on running organizations, we still see this problem that we have discussed now, day in and day out. That tells us that there is something more deeper than prioritization itself that sits underneath both prioritizations and setting up objectives and key results. There are two, in my opinion, that is actually conspiring against us. The first challenge I have seen in many organizations is the taxonomy challenge. The second one is the translation challenge. Taxonomy is if you read any annual report, you listen to any earnings call, you sit through any senior executive presentation, you hear a whole lot of jargon. There will be outcomes, objectives, goals, vision, mission, priorities, drivers, you name it. Plenty of them are there. It is not the challenge of vocabulary itself. It is the shared understanding of what we want to achieve. When someone prefers one initiative over another, it looks political. Often it is not. They may be attaching value to a different dimension, coming from a different perspective, or using a different word for it. Without that shared definition layer, the disagreement itself cannot be resolved on its own merits of this is important versus that, because we just don't understand each other. I have written a piece. There is one word, value, we all agree matters, but no one knows what it is. I have worked in banks quite a lot. I sit with an asset manager and a portfolio director together. When they say portfolio management, they have completely different meanings of what portfolio means. When they talk about value, they have 100 different meanings. It is not possible to even to start the very first sentence in the business case. That is the problem we live in. That is the translation challenge. Terminology challenge. The next one is the translation challenge. This is where what you mentioned actually hits me. And Alex, you made this point, as a question to David at the very beginning. Do we even bother to communicate our priorities as they change? It looks so confusing. Why I said that is that the first one is that there are two flavors to a translation challenge. One is the mechanism of translation, how strategy actually translated into the executable decisions. We have a 5-year strategy. How do we turn? We want to growth, we want resilience, we want efficiency, we want customer trust, we want regulatory competence, whatever it is that we can actually attach to the decisions that we want to make. Many organizations answer these questions very episodically in a strategy workshops and some other meetings, but not as a working management discipline. And the translation happens in these particular fragments in different rooms with different participants and no consolidated trace. The second and the most important part under the translation challenge, what I really wanted to land here today is that understanding of different layers of prioritization. David, when I saw your post on LinkedIn, the banner really struck me. There is level 1 priorities objectives, and then there is level 2 and level 3. That's where I actually stopped for almost half a day before I responded to you on this post. I want to be part of it. Because most of the people misread it, don't get it. Prioritization, when you're setting up this strategy, is totally different to prioritization when you're actually deciding on which change initiative to progress with. Quite often, most organizations conflate level 1 and level 2 as the same exercise and go through the same prioritization mechanism. It is fundamentally flawed. I can go on with various examples. One example that really strikes me is the Jaguar one. They want to close down their entire electric and diesel engine. They want to go towards electric engines and cut down everything on the ICE. Compared to that with Volkswagen, they have a completely different strategy. At the setting of the strategy level, it is more optionality, where to play and how to win. When that particular strategic choice is made, then comes, do we have the capacity? Do we have the capability? What are the investments required? What sequence we want to do it? That is completely different ball game, altogether completely different game altogether. But what I observed in most of the banks and regulatory industry and also many other things is that they conflate strategic optionality with change initiative prioritization to the delivery challenges that they face on a daily basis. When these three are not aligned, then it looks like the priorities are getting changed. They're not. We are actually using wrong tools in the right moments. That is where the alignment breaks down. Without disciplined translation between these levels, each level interprets strategy through its own lens. Like you said, Gregor, on this particular one, the board sees priorities. They think it's absolutely clear what everyone should be doing for the next 5 years. But executive leadership sees functional trade-offs. Portfolio teams see investment categories. Delivery teams see scope and deadlines. In fact, operations where the actual value gets realized see disruption and extra work. That's how strategy is currently translated in many organizations. Even more importantly, no one explains, especially I want to hear from the strategy colleagues in here, is that why we believe what we created this year and next year would actually result in the outcomes we want in the next 5 years. Usually strategy folks, I don't see them actually translating them in a way that is meaningful to the rest of the organization. Many organizations believe that we build it so customers will come, which is, we know, not usually the case. This is where we feel that prioritization becomes political, not because people behave badly, but because the translation system is missing. Without it, prioritization simply exposes the incoherence we talked about, David. You put it really well in your slides. That incoherence becomes visible than actually moving forward and making prioritization work. So the conclusion for me is that prioritization is required. OKR frameworks could work, but we need to fix the underlying structural challenges for them to work. That is the missing machinery for me. If these two exist, absolutely. In fact, we can actually go, prioritization can become the first-class citizen. It doesn't have to be the Trojan horse. It can be the first-class citizen doing its role, what it is supposed to be doing. And I stop here. Any questions?
That was the key thing, Kiran. Your last point there is can we get prioritization from being that tactical thing to being not being a Trojan horse to being that key aspect. But Alex, your slot, sir.
Right. Well, that was really interesting. I agree with a huge amount of what you said. It resonates strongly. And I liked what you said about different lenses at different levels. But this is to me where I think we might hit reality, and it's going to be more than a bump in the road. At the top, everything is seen through a political lens. Everything is seen with political bias. I've worked in organizations where the jockeying between the board directors has been enormous. So even if the board agrees by consensus, by majority, but not everybody agrees, whether or not that decision on what priorities is going to be number one or number two is political, it will always be seen by some, perceived as political and something to fight back against. So, do you have an understanding of a system that will help us prioritize pragmatically and that will work, even on the basis that at the top level, everything will be seen through a political lens and therefore fought against, whether it's of benefit or not? I don't know if that makes sense. I'm saying
It
directors'
does.
personal benefits.
It does make sense. There are two aspects to it. One I really want to share. The other one I'm not sure how much I can actually share. I can tell, whatever is there in the parliament at the moment, so which is a public domain, so there is no confidentiality. The first part of this one is that I say politics as good. It is the best mechanism for the resource allocation challenge that we have, the majority-based, consensus-based, sometimes politically viewed, because the alternatives are dangerous. Not everyone can be Steve Jobs, where he or she, someone like can say that, no, this is not going to the live, going to the production. On that day, everyone is going to stand up on a stage. Steve Jobs can do it. Hardly any other CEO, no one can replicate it. So politics is good. But do you have a mechanism? How can we make it? One of the things I worked in many financial institutions and some of the regulators is that how do we describe the optionality and the decision-making framework that makes trade-offs visible? Strategies are fantastic, and we all have seen them in loads. But the problem we have is that how do we actually, what can we give to the board or executive leadership team in order to showcase the optionality? And what political motivations are there to say that this is more important than the other, and this is what we all agree, even though less than half of them have disagreed. That optionality, making it public to the rest of the organization, even internally, showcasing that divergence in the board or exco decision making gives a powerful means to the rest of the organizations where choices are, why those hard choices are being made. That makes rest of the prioritization and execution a lot more better, because the organization knows why some choices seemingly good are discarded by the majority, even if it is politically motivated. I have 2-3 tools that I have developed over the years. Happy to share post the meeting, but fantastic question and thanks for that.
Has anybody else got any observations or comments on this? I mean, the key thing for me, the establishment taxonomy, process for translation, but then the multiple the existence of multiple layers of prioritization, some of which might be systematic, some of it might not be. Are people seeing the multiple layers, for example, problems with taxonomy, difficulty translating? Chip in, anyone, please.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. Yes, we get this very frequently. What happens at the boardroom? If we've got everybody understands we've got some big project kicking off that we're going to do X, Y, Z, but at a daily basis, if you're either operational or project staff, if you've got to make a choice about, well, I was working on this data thing for so-and-so, and I was told it was important, and I know that thing is happening over there, and I was told that was important, but nobody's actually told me that it's important to me. That happens all the time. And just reprioritizing. Oh, well, we'll get around to that when I have finished the thing that I have been working on for 9 months that I was told was drop dead vital. We are not aligned in day to day and what it means. It is that translation.
But suggesting to me that the act of trying to prioritise should surface the lack of agreement higher up and the lack of communication that's happened and cascaded down. Anyone got any last observations before we move on to Veronica?
I think I just agree with what's being said about oversimplification and thinking it's easy is a lot of the time the root cause for crass application. I think Veronica was alluding to it. So people trying to prioritize just on bits and pieces they've heard or half truths, old strategies. I think I've heard on this group before. You know, the 8-month-old kind of lists somewhere. So it just reminds. I think a lot of the time, prioritization is sort of the point where organizational failures come to life. So it's sort of where they manifest as opposed to necessarily being a prioritization problem. It's an organizational behavioral problem. In the same respect, I used to work in retail many moons ago, right? Anything that went wrong in head office tended to manifest in stores. Why? Because that's where the action happens. So anything that's going wrong in the system, be it the board aren't agreed with something or, you know, something's not well articulated to Kieran's point, people can convince themselves when they walk out of the meeting it's fine. Because when they walk out of the meeting, it's fine. Because they haven't yet pushed it through to its natural conclusion where it isn't fine.